Jealousy is often referred to as the one or the green-eyed monster. I looked up that phrase to try to figure out, now, how did that come about? Well, apparently, Shakespeare is accredited. I didn't get a chance to call Bino, the resident Shakespeare expert, but I'll ask him later if I got it right. Shakespeare, apparently in The Merchant of Venice, referred to that phrase in a way to say that jealousy is, in fact, the green-eyed monster. Apparently it comes from the idea that when someone is sick, sometimes they get a green tint to the skin or maybe to the eyes. And then it boils over into the sickness of jealousy. And so you have someone who is green with envy. And that may be because, to some degree, at least for our culture, our money, paper money, is green, and therefore it fits. Because a lot of the jealousy and a lot of the envy has something to do with materialism. And it all boils down to money. As we continue our Sunday morning summer sermon series entitled, How Much Do You Weigh? Today we discuss the burden of jealousy. It may very well be that in your life you struggle with jealousy. Maybe envy has taken root in your heart. Not because you want it, not because you desire it, not because you've been looking for it, but because the way the world is and the way things are around us and the way television and radio and billboards promote jealousy or envy can take root, maybe even before we really recognize it is there. This word jealousy is an interesting word. Using the Old Testament and the New Testament words, in the original languages, it occurs 77 times. 57 of them are followed immediately by some kind of intense action. Because you see, jealousy is an intense word. It is a word that drives people forward. You cannot be neutral if you are bitten by the bug of envy. You don't just sit on the sidelines. You are forced into doing something. And every time that word in Scripture is used, it seems as though this intense word has caused somebody to do something. Sometimes it's good. The zeal and the desire to serve. But for our purposes, the weight, the burden that is jealousy. How is it that jealousy is so sickening? Why is it such a problem? Let's notice a few passages together that help us see how bad jealousy is. Like the one that was just read in James chapter 3. And I noticed the phrase in about verse 16, where it says, where evil or where envy is, confusion and evil are there. Jealousy is so sickening because it confuses life. It gets us to thinking about things that make our lives so confused. How did we get in this mess? Why am I not over there? Why do I not have that? And our thinking becomes confused because our envy and our jealousy makes us look in directions that confuse our own lives. And that is a real problem. Notice the Song of Solomon in chapter 8 and in verse 6. There the writer is saying, talking to his beloved, and he refers to this concept of jealousy. And notice what he says: bind me as a seal in your heart and as a seal on my arm. As love is stronger than death, jealousy is as cruel as the grave. And its flame, consuming. It is a vehement flame. Envy and jealousy are so dangerous and so sickening because once it begins to burn inside the heart and mind of an individual, if not extinguished, it will consume and burn into a flame that could be eventually uncontrollable. It's a fire that gets inside of someone and could consume them. The Proverbs writer in chapter 27 in verse 4 asks this question: who can stand against jealousy? Jealousy and envy drives someone to their knees. In other words, it pushes them and forces them in places they don't want to go. That's what jealousy does. Crime shows are built many times on jealousy. What is it that caused that murder? Because they were envious of that person. What is it that caused that robbery to take place? Because they were jealous and they wanted what was over there. No one can stand before it. And I think the writer was meaning this: no one can stand with it, hold it close to him, and continue to stand as an honorable human being. Because jealousy won't let you do that. How about James chapter 4 and verse 2? You lust and do not have. You murder and covet and cannot obtain. You fight and war, but you have not, because you do not ask. Why don't you ask? God is saying through James. Because you are jealous and envious. And jealousy and envy blocks the hand, the benevolent hand of God from your life or my life if jealousy takes root. Jealousy is sickening. The Proverbs writer in chapter 14 in verse 30 said that a healthy heart is good for the body, gives life to the body. But jealousy is rottenness to the bones. Whenever we hear that dreaded C word, cancer, and we inquire about that cancer, we are concerned. And we know that cancer can get into the bones and cause a problem physically in people's lives. That's what the writer says jealousy does to the bones. It rots them away from the inside out. But Job summed it all up this way in chapter 5 and in verse 2. jealousy or envy slays the simple ones, the ones who are caught up in it, the ones who are taken over, the ones who, because of a simple-minded approach to life, meaning that all that really counts is what is physical and I can touch and I can hold and I can possess. Those who are drawn into that simple-minded approach to life will be slain by jealousy. Truly, the writer is right when he says, everything bad can come out of jealousy. It's sickening. It'll kill. So that it makes sense to ask the question, well, how is it possible? If something is that bad, how is it possible that someone could get caught up in it? I think there are two reasons. Let's consider the reasons and then think about the cure. Number one, I believe people are caught up in jealousy and envy because they are not content with their own lives. People who are not content with their own lives have at least two problems. They have wandering eyes and longing desires. People who are not content with their own lives constantly are looking around to see what other people have and what other people are. In fact, a person could be happy with a certain outfit, but someone else walks in and all of a sudden, I'm not happy with this one because I like that one. You know, that's childish, right? How many times have you seen children playing? And each of them has their own thing they're playing with, a toy or whatever, and everybody's getting along. One of those rare moments that all parents are going, yeah, that's great, keep it up. And then some parent destroys it, right? Because they let the child come in, another child, with a totally different toy nobody has ever seen before. What happens? All of a sudden, that peaceful content is turned into madness because I want that one. All of a sudden, I don't like this one. I want that one. We understand children operate that way, but adults do too. Now that I have moved into the area of life struggling and kicking with this smartphone thing, I've begun to feel the tinge of those things, and I beat it down all the time. My kids on their smartphone showed me a flashlight. I thought that's about the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I want a flashlight. First thing I did, get me a flashlight. On my phone. I admit, that's pretty cool. Been playing golf with friends of mine. And I've had it made. I didn't have a smartphone, wasn't paying the money. But I'm playing with them. And they have a GPS on their phone. And I'll go, Bert, how far am I from the hole? Well, let me check. And he tells me exactly how far. I know what club to pick. I hit it. Good shape. Oh, but I had to get a smartphone. Now I got to have a GPS so I can tell somebody else how far they are from the hole. And I'm liking it. You know why? Because now I got it. And now I'm having to fight that jealousy bug. But I was not going to have to fight too hard because I still don't like reading on that thing. So I'm not going to worry about all that other stuff. But at least I get what it means. Wandering eyes and longing desires. People who are not content with their own lives are jealous of the lives of other people. Therefore, number 2, people get caught up in the jealousy bug because they cannot rejoice with others' good fortune. That's what results. You ever heard this? Ever thought this? Somebody tells you, guess what? I went to this party and I won this really big door prize. And you think, well, I was at the party. I wish I had won it. Can't rejoice in the good fortunes of somebody else. When someone does well, are you able to say, that's wonderful, I'm glad? Or do you have the thought, why can't that ever happen to me? People who are jealous have a hard time rejoicing with other people. Therefore, they get eaten up with the jealousy bug. And I fear that sometimes the jealousy bug comes into this building. It comes into this building because of some of the very things we've already mentioned. Somebody has the latest and greatest electronic device and we're showing it to everybody. Ooh, how did he get that? How was she able to afford that? I want one. Or we start comparing clothes. We start comparing cars. And we walk into this facility with an opportunity to worship God. And on the way in, we have to fight off the jealousy bug just to sit in this room. So how are we going to cure it? What are we going to do? Today, if anyone is fighting the jealousy bug, if envy has taken root in your hearts, let's do 2 things to try and help you battle. Number 1, learn to be content. And yes, it's a learned behavior because discontent is natural. A baby is born. The baby gets hungry, everybody knows it. Discontent. Over time, the baby learns to be content. You have to train that. Hebrew writer, chapter 13, verses 5 and 6. Let your life be without covetousness, and be content with what things you have. Be content with what things you have. For God has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you, so that we might say, the Lord is my helper. Why should I be afraid? I will not fear. Be content with what things you have. Learn to be content. Isn't it interesting that the concept of being content is written in the form of a command? Because we have to learn to do it. So what does it mean to be content? The word content literally means enough. That's what it means. Enough. To be content means I have enough. Remember the story of the 10 virgins at the wedding feast. 5 were wise and 5 were foolish. And they were waiting for the groom to come, and he never told them when, and they had their lamps, and they're holding them, waiting for him, and he delayed coming for a long time, and the 5 foolish ran out of oil. And they came to the wise ones and said, "Share with us." And here's what they said: "We can't do that lest we do not have enough." Same word. Here's what that means. To be content means I have what I need to do what I need to do. That's being content. I learned about that, the culmination of that, if you will, in at least one way this summer. My whole life I've prayed this about our children. Lord, let me live long enough to see them marry and form a Christian home. And that'll be enough. I'm content. Now, every grandchild I get after that is just icing on the cake that I won't even eat. Every new event is just a plus and a bonus. Learn to be content. So how do you do that? There's only one way. And the only way to learn to be content is this: really to say, God is enough for me. If we base our contentment on anything physical, it won't work. You base your contentment on anything other than God, and you will be disappointed. If all of our contentment grows out of God is enough for me, then you'll be all right. You'll be all right whether you have this or whether you have this. You'll be all right. Paul said to Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 6, "Godliness with contentment is great gain." Listen to what Paul said to the Corinthians. 2 Corinthians chapter 3 and about verse 5. Our sufficiency is not of ourselves, that we should boast. But our sufficiency is of Christ. Today, if you are struggling with jealousy or envy, you have to learn to be content. And the only way to be content is to acknowledge that God is enough. And when God is enough, what else do you need? Because when you have enough with God, then everything you get is just a bonus on top of enough. And number 2, learn to rejoice in the good things of others. In Romans 12 and in verse 15, the statement is real simple. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. It is a sad existence When someone has great joy or honor or privilege or whatever, when I can't say, I'm proud and happy for you. If I can't rejoice that you are happy because something good happened to you, and if instead I have to think, why didn't it happen to me? What a terrible existence. Because all that does is it keeps concentrating on me and my stuff. And if I can't rejoice with somebody else, that very fact alone proves that for me, God is not enough. So to cure jealousy, learn to be content and practice rejoicing in the good fortune of other people. Now, I hope that brings to mind the cure, the prescription that Jesus wrote for life. There was a lawyer who came out of the crowd following Jesus. And he said, "Good teacher, what is the greatest commandment?" And Jesus said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment." In other words, let God be enough. But he didn't stop. And the second is like to it. This is from Matthew 22, 37 to 39. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Notice, on these commandments hang all the law and the prophets. In other words, everything God had done in the Old Testament, everything, the whole law that he wrote, and every prophet that he sent, stood on the same foundation. Let God be enough, and love your neighbor as yourself. And guess what? It's not possible to be jealous when you do that. It's not possible to be envious when you do those two things. So today, if you came in here carrying the burden of jealousy, and you know it's there, because your eyes just keep looking around, and your desires keep wandering and longing, because I'm not focusing here, I'm focusing out here. That's when the jealousy will kill you. But you can learn to be content, and you can learn to rejoice with others when you let God be enough. Today, I hope that you have an opportunity to release that burden of jealousy, to let it off your heart and out of your life, because I know you don't want it anyway. And may God stand with you as you work on that to be better and to conquer that bug the best you can. It's interesting that the book of Exodus, when God gave the law to the Jews in Exodus 20, he began this way: I am the Lord. You shall have no other gods before me, for I am a jealous God. Wait a minute. How can God be a jealous God if jealousy is so bad? It's the intensity of the word. I can be intense in things that are good, or I can be intense in things that are evil. God is nothing but good, and his jealousy, as the word is used, comes from his intense desire for everything to be right. And the only way to be right, he said, is to let me be God and let nobody else or nothing else take that place. And how did he show it? By sending Jesus, who died for and in behalf of and instead of us. And thereby, his longing, his jealousy is, you're mine. I want you to stay with me. And that's a righteous thing, to be jealous after a godly sort. And today, God is jealous over you and me. He wants us to be his children. He wants us to be faithful. He wants us to do what's right. Today, if you're not a child of God, if you've not been immersed into the waters of baptism to rise a brand new creature, washed from the sin of life, you have that opportunity. Or if you need to get back in standing with God as you should, we're here for you as we stand and sing.